They denied her VIP seat because of how she looked. 5 minutes later, the pilot and crew were all out of a job. Dr. Lena Marshall arrived early at O'Hare International, dressed in a simple black pantsuit, slim-frame glasses, and her signature high bun that never moved out of place. To the casual observer, she looked more like a university professor than the CEO of a $700 million biotech firm. Her name was clearly printed on the boarding pass, Seat 1D, first class, chosen intentionally for its privacy. Lena was headed to Seattle to deliver the opening keynote at the largest biomedical innovation summit of the year. But as she approached the gate, a flight attendant stepped in front of her with a tight smile and a rehearsed tone. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this seat has been reserved for one of our priority elite members," she said. No offer to check the reservation, no questions asked. Lena was then kindly asked to relocate to 26B, middle seat, economy, near the restroom. The flight attendant's explanation was curt, practiced. "It's our policy to prioritize Diamond Elite members," she said, not offering any further detail, not once asking to verify Lena's name or reservation. It was the kind of answer designed to end a conversation, not invite clarity. Lena stood still for a moment, brows raised, waiting, not in confusion, but in quiet calculation. She'd flown enough to know when she was being handled. Moments later, a white man in a tailored grey suit boarded the plane, AirPods in, eyes glazed with casual entitlement. He didn't acknowledge her presence, didn't ask any questions, didn't hesitate. He just walked down the aisle and slid into Seat 1D, as if it had always belonged to him. The flight attendant, now animated and gracious, offered him the kind of warm greeting Lena hadn't received since she stepped onto the plane. Lena didn't raise her voice, she didn't ask for a manager or make a scene. That wasn't her style, and it wasn't necessary. Instead, she calmly reached into her coat pocket, tapped the voice record button on her phone, and held the device steady in her lap. Then, with measured grace, she switched to the video camera. She didn't pan or zoom. She didn't need to. The indifference of the staff, the speed of their assumption, and the man's silent confidence in taking what wasn't his, it was all right there in the frame. With that, Lena gathered her carry-on bag, took a slow breath, and walked back to Seat 26B, a cramped middle spot between a teenager blasting music through oversized headphones and an elderly man who coughed every 90 seconds without covering his mouth. She didn't flinch. She just sat down, crossed her legs, adjusted her sleeve, and opened her phone again. Not to tweet, not to vent, but to take a note. A Z143, Atlantic Wings, denied seat, no verification, no apology. Then she sent a short message to her executive assistant. "Please flag this for post-summit follow-up. Flight 143, Atlantic Wings, record everything." She didn't say more. Tasha would know what that meant. Around her, the plane continued boarding as if nothing had happened. The man in 1D ordered a drink before takeoff, neat whiskey, no ice, and pulled out a hardcover business book, totally unaware that the woman he had displaced wasn't just another passenger, but someone who had the influence and network to shake the very foundation of the airline he was flying. Lena didn't look back at him. She didn't need to. She wasn't trying to reclaim her seat or prove her worth to strangers. She was watching, taking mental notes in the same way she had in boardrooms, at investment pitches, during backhanded introductions. People often revealed themselves in small, unguarded moments, and Lena had trained herself to catch them all. That was part of what made her so good at what she did. Not just building a biotech empire from scratch, but navigating the subtle, coded ways the world tried to shrink women like her. The air around her grew colder as the cabin doors sealed and the safety demonstration began. A few passengers glanced at her with vague curiosity, sensing something off but not quite placing it. The attendant who had escorted her out of first class walked by without meeting her eyes. Lena leaned her head against the window, phone still recording in her lap. She wasn't angry, not yet. But she knew with certainty that this wouldn't end at 26B. Not for her, not for them. Wedged between a teenager snoring with his mouth open and a middle-aged man noisily tearing into a tuna sandwich, Lena sat in 26B with the poise of someone who'd endured far worse. She didn't grimace, didn't roll her eyes. She simply adjusted her posture, opened her laptop, and picked up where she left off, preparing the opening keynote slides for the Global Biotech Innovation Summit. The hum of the cabin faded into background noise as her fingers moved with quiet purpose. On the screen, the title slide gleamed, Opening Remarks, Dr. Lena Marshall, CEO, Novagene Therapeutics. Her name was bold, her title unmistakable. It wasn't ego, it was fact. She wasn't attending the summit as a guest or a panelist, she was headlining it. And yet, just 20 minutes earlier, a flight attendant had looked at her and seen a woman who didn't belong in seat 1D. That was the part that always stung the most. Not the ignorance, but the certainty behind it. The assumption. As Lena clicked through the slides, a shadow passed beside her. One of the flight attendants walked by, same navy uniform, same rigid expression, but this time something shifted. Her gaze landed on Lena's screen, lingered for just a beat too long, then flicked away. She didn't say anything, didn't offer a drink or even a forced smile, but her shoulders stiffened as she moved on, like someone who had just realized they might have made a mistake and wasn't ready to face it. Lena didn't look up. She didn't need to. She was used to the delayed recognition, the double takes, the awkward backpedaling once people saw her name in bold or heard her introduced on stage. Recognition for women like her often came last. 30,000 feet below, Lena's executive assistant, Tasha Brewster, had seen the text and acted accordingly. A quick scroll through Lena's recent mentions and event press confirmed the opportunity. Tasha didn't post often, but when she did, her words had weight. The tweet was short, tactful, and razor-sharp. Build a company for 15 years, sell it for 9 figures, still get asked to move out of a first-class seat because you don't look VIP. Wild. No tags, no names, no hashtags, just observation. But Twitter doesn't need details when the truth is already loud. Within minutes, replies started trickling in. A few tech insiders noticed the phrasing, connected the dots. Someone shared a screenshot from the summit's official website showing Lena's keynote announcement. Another replied, "Wait, is this about Dr. Marshall? She's on that Seattle flight today." The tweet hadn't gone viral yet, but it was catching a spark, the kind of slow burn that lights up quietly before it explodes. Back on the plane, Lena closed her laptop and exhaled slowly. The seatbelt sign had gone off, the beverage cart was rattling down the aisle, and the man beside her was now snoring, his head tilted dangerously close to her shoulder. She adjusted slightly, still composed. Her phone buzzed, one new message from Tasha. FYI, the tweet's getting traction. Nothing huge yet, but a few industry folks are picking it up. Are you good? Lena smiled faintly. She typed back, very. There was no firestorm yet. No statement, no official action. But the seed had been planted, and like every system she'd ever disrupted, it would only take one misstep before the cracks began to show. Lena had learned long ago that when people don't see your value, you don't shout it. You let the silence do the heavy lifting. The tweet, the video, the name on the slide, they weren't weapons. They were receipts. And the airline had just cashed in one they couldn't afford. By the time the plane hit cruising altitude, the tweet had taken on a life of its own. It hadn't exploded into full-blown virality, yet, but the right people were seeing it, and more importantly, the right people were reacting. Within an hour, the internal Slack channels at Atlantic Wings were buzzing. Screenshots of the tweet were being forwarded to executives, press contacts were pinging the comms team, and someone from legal had already flagged the situation as potentially reputational. At corporate headquarters in Dallas, the director of communications called the CEO directly. "We've got a problem on AZ-143, she said, skipping pleasantries. A big one. The name Lena Marshall had surfaced on an internal risk watch list moments earlier. Not because she was a threat, but because she was an asset. A recently acquired partner in a high-profile digital security contract. Someone whose name was currently on slide decks and internal emails tied to an ongoing collaboration. A name that mattered. Back on the plane, subtle changes began to ripple through the cabin. The lead flight attendant's smile had disappeared, replaced by a strained stiffness that even casual observers could detect. Crew members began whispering in tight circles near the galley. Tablets were being checked, tapped, updated. Within minutes, a flight phone call had been made from the cockpit. Then, in an unprecedented move mid-flight, the captain emerged, mid-50s, square-jawed, grey hair neatly combed under his hat, and made his way down the aisle. He stopped at row 26, standing directly in front of Lena. Passengers nearby turned to look. The buzz had begun. "Dr. Marshall," he said, his voice formal but low, "I want to extend my personal apology. We've been made aware of the seating error and would be honored to return you to 1D immediately." Lena looked up, not startled, not flattered, just deliberate. "Was the passenger who took that seat informed of the mistake?" she asked, tone even. The captain hesitated. "He offered to relocate," the captain said finally, a trace of discomfort flickering across his face. Lena arched an eyebrow, not in anger, but with quiet precision. "Or was he told?" she asked, her voice softer now but unmistakably clear. The captain didn't answer. His silence was the answer. Lena nodded slowly. "I'll stay here," she said, eyes returning to the screen in front of her. "But before we land, I'd like a conversation with the captain. A real one, face to face." The man standing before her blinked, momentarily thrown by the distinction. Then he straightened. "Of course," he replied. "I'll be available." He turned to walk back up the aisle, leaving behind a silence that settled thick in the cabin. Around Lena, passengers who had earlier ignored the situation now stared openly. Some pretended not to watch while sneaking glances. Others whispered to one another behind raised hands. A woman across the aisle pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. Lena remained composed, her face unreadable. She wasn't seeking revenge. She wasn't looking to make a scene. What she wanted was for the system that had mishandled her to sit with its own discomfort. She wanted accountability, not the kind that came with headlines and hashtags, but the kind that forced a conversation in the boardroom, that rewrote a policy, that shifted a culture. The captain's appearance wasn't the solution. It was just the signal. The airline had realized who she was, but not soon enough. And now, Lena Marshall wasn't just a passenger, she was a mirror. And they were all about to see themselves in it. While the plane began its slow descent into Seattle, events on the ground were moving faster than anyone in the air could imagine. Inside a high-rise conference room at Atlantic Wing's corporate headquarters in Dallas, the board of directors had been called into an emergency meeting. Lena Marshall's formal email, composed mid-flight and sent directly to multiple C-suite executives, was already circulating. It was clear, professional, and unflinching. Attached was a high-definition video file, time-stamped and labeled, Incident, Flight AZ-143. The footage showed everything: the request to vacate seat 1D, the dismissive tone, the lack of verification, and Lena's silent compliance. There was no angry outburst, no confrontation, only clarity. The email ended with one line: "This is not just about me. This is about what your company normalized." Within minutes, the CEO of Atlantic Wings made a direct call to the captain of AZ-143. His voice was flat, cold, precise. "Effective immediately, the entire crew is suspended pending full investigation. When that plane lands, they are relieved of duty." Back at SeaTac Airport, just as passengers began to unbuckle their seatbelts, Lena remained seated, calm, unhurried. As she exited the jet bridge, two individuals in sleek black suits were waiting by the gate, discreet but unmistakable. "Dr. Marshall?" one asked, flashing a badge bearing the Atlantic Wings emblem. She nodded. "We've been instructed to escort you to the executive lounge. The CEO would like to speak with you in person." Lena didn't ask questions. She walked with them in silence, her steps steady, her presence unmistakable. A few fellow passengers turned their heads, unsure of what they were witnessing, but sensing it mattered. Inside the VIP lounge, the airline's CEO stood as she entered. A tall man in his early 50s, clearly sleep-deprived and far more tense than the photos of him on Forbes would suggest. "Dr. Marshall," he began, his voice carrying both weight and apology, "thank you for taking the time. I won't offer excuses. There are none. What happened to you was unacceptable. And while we've already taken disciplinary action, I'd like to go further." He paused, watching her expression, which remained unreadable. I'd like to invite you to join a newly formed internal advisory council focused on equity, flight protocol reform, and leadership accountability. You'd have full access. No NDAs, no filters, just the opportunity to help us do better from the inside out. Lena didn't respond right away. She simply looked around the room, the polished glass walls, the curated art, the silence that followed public embarrassment. Then she turned back to him, voice level. "I didn't come here to clean up your mess," she said, "but I will speak at your next leadership summit, on record, about this flight, about what it means to be seen and what it means to be ignored." The CEO nodded slowly. The system had been shaken, and Lena was now holding the microphone. A short clip surfaced on Twitter the next morning. Lena Marshall, seated calmly in 26B, eyes unflinching, expression unreadable, as a flight attendant asked her to vacate a seat she had rightfully booked. The caption under the video read, "She didn't fight. She just remembered." And when she spoke, the sky moved. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, and that's what made it so powerful. The video was quiet, but the silence spoke volumes. It began trending within hours, amplified not by outrage, but by reflection. People weren't sharing it to rage, they were sharing it to reckon. The clip became a mirror, asking passengers, corporations, and leaders alike what they choose to see when someone doesn't look the part. Lena never posted the video herself. She didn't have to. The world was already watching, and this time it saw everything. Discrimination doesn't always announce itself with loud slurs or aggressive gestures. Sometimes it hides behind polished smiles, behind policy language, and phrases like priority seating and standard protocol. It lives in the reflex to assume someone doesn't belong, not because of what they've done, but because of how they appear. Lena didn't need to prove her worth to reclaim her seat. Instead, she let the system expose itself, moment by moment. Her silence wasn't submission. It was strategic. Her calm wasn't compliance. It was clarity. And the seat she gave up became the stage on which a broken hierarchy unraveled. This story isn't just about a flight. It's about the subtle ways value is misjudged, and how power, when held with integrity, can shift culture more forcefully than outrage ever could. It reminds us that complicity often comes in silence, but so does transformation. Lena's restraint didn't make her weak, it made her unforgettable. In a world run by data and image, it is still the character that distinguishes a decent company from one waiting for its next crisis. And in a time where apologies come fast and change comes slow, this moment demanded more. Not just policy updates, but cultural reckoning. If you believe a VIP seat should never be determined by who looks like they belong there, share this story. Let it be a reminder that leadership isn't just about taking the mic. It's about knowing when your silence holds the weight of truth. Like, comment, and subscribe to X Daily Stories to hear more narratives that challenge the systems we move through every day. Because sometimes the strongest stories are the ones told without raising a voice, just raising a mirror.